All right. So hello, everyone. Hope you're doing super duper well today. In today's session, we have Nick, who is the senior designer, a senior designer at That Game Company. So if you played Journey or played Sky Children of Light, he's one of the people that worked on them. Nick, if you'd like to go and tell us about yourself and stuff. And today the session is going to be about level design to a certain extent. So yeah, Nick, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Hi. There's so many more people in here than I was expecting. This is awesome. I just want to clarify. I didn't work on Journey. I have worked on Sky, but it's the studio and we're all mixed up. I'll go ahead and share screen now and just get to it. I was telling Ashraf earlier, I'm pretty casual with this. I really just want it to be as effective useful for you all as possible. So I have a presentation lined up, but I do want to leave room for questions at the end. So if you have questions along the way, just like type them in the chat, or hold on to them, and hopefully at the end we'll get to them. So everyone can see my gecko here. Okay. Yes, I see. Yep. Okay, sounds good. This is my gecko pickle. I just like to start the presentations off with something fun. So let's talk about myself, which I normally dislike it when speakers talk about themselves, but I want to help give you guys some context about where I'm coming from. So I went to school at USC and I studied architecture. So I didn't study game design. USC is in LA, and I'm in Long Beach right now, which is 20 minutes south of LA. So my life for a long time was just like architecture. Then somebody at Harvard thought it was a good idea to let me in, and I did my graduate degree there. But that's not after spending time working in architecture, being an architectural designer, which was totally fine. But I also spent time working as a fabricator at the US's largest live work art colony, which is the brewery here, working on some big art projects, architectural design work. Also, I worked in a wood shop for some time, and I was working at a help desk, helping people learn how to use Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever. I worked on some personal unreleased games in an attempt to try to get good at games, because you look it up online and everybody's just like, how do you make games? You just start making games. And really there's no excuse now. All the tools are free and available to you. You guys have an amazing course, so you're already getting a leg up. But I worked on some games on my own, just to develop the skills. Obviously every time you work on a game, you're like, this is going to be the best thing ever. But just because it doesn't get released doesn't mean it's not worth it. You learn something every single time. I did eventually release a game solo where I did the art, programming, design, whatever, everything myself, called Nebula Within. It's currently on Steam and it's free, so if you want to check it out, you can go ahead. But I was really depressed at the time that I made this, and I was looking for a way as an outlet to express myself and to get good at the game stuff. I'm glad that I did this project, because this project has helped me immensely when I went to apply to That Game Company. I was actually applying to a lot of game studios at the time, and almost got a job at Naughty Dog. But because I had no experience professionally in games, people were a bit apprehensive to hire this person who it has no game experience. But I was like, look, here's the thing. I made it myself. Just trust me. I can do this. Eventually, That Game Company thought it was, they liked me, and it worked out. And I'm really happy that it did, because I've been at That Game Company for about 3 years. My official job title is Senior Technical Game Designer, which for Sky Children of the Light. So I am doing, as far as Sky is concerned, if you've played it, we have a seasonal content that comes out every few months. So one of my big responsibilities is leading the development of our seasonal content. We have 2 teams to kind of stagger. And so I lead the design on every other season. So if you've played the game, I led the design for, or I participated in Sanctuary Prophecy, but I led the design for Assembly and Flight and Performance and Aurora and Passage and whatever. I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff. Sky is a really interesting game. It's free to play. It's on mobile. It's on console. It's worth playing. It's not perfect, but nothing ever is perfect. Performance cutest season. Thank you so much. Working on Performance was actually a blast. It was one of my favorite ones to work on. Okay, anyway, that's enough about myself. And these are just some of the random stuff I've worked on. Oh, and what's cool about being a game designer is people can make fan art of you. So this is fan art of me that people have drawn, which is really fun. Okay, now let's talk about why we're actually here. You can go online and look up like level design best practices, or how to do this, how to do that. And like I even have given a GDC talk on level design. And I encourage you all to go watch it, not because I think I'm the best, but just because I think it's helpful. That said, a lot of the resources you'll find online cater to like the craft aspect of level design. And I want to create a bit of a distinction between craft and art. So neither one of these is better than the other. They're just focused on different things. So a crafts person is focused on creating a high quality, repeatable object, like this chair, for example. And they're really good at the kind of specific details, the moment to moment connection between everything. An artist is more concerned with the kind of conceptual, philosophical, and of course the execution of a creative work that is usually just a one-off. It's unique, and then they move on to the next one. So all of the level design tips, like, make sure your corridors look like this, or when you're using landmarks, do that, or what, all of those best practices are more on the craft side. So I kind of wanted to cater this talk towards the art side, where I want to focus on process. So none of these are going to be specific examples, but hopefully it'll give you an idea of the thought process I go through and the process that we as a studio go through as well when we're creating new levels. This also just applies to design in general. As far as level design is concerned, get this Zoom thing out of the way. Level design is a lot like defining the canvas for the player's actions. I think of it not like creating the movie itself, but creating the landscape for that movie to take place. So level design is really important. And depending on the game, it can basically be the game, and it can also just be a total background. For that reason, I think of level design like a field of play, where I am laying out the tools, I'm laying out the moment-to-moment experiences for the player to then be able to have that emotional journey themselves. The first step in my level design process, and I think every good level design process, is to develop your mechanics. Ultimately, you can't do a level design without having mechanics to start with. I think we take design for granted as people, because like our mechanics as people have like already been defined. Like, oh, most of us have 2 legs and walk. Most of us can see. Most of us can do these things. But even then, that's not perfect, because not everybody can do those things. With games, you are creating the entire universe from scratch. So how can you create an environment if you don't know the rules of that universe? So the first step is to develop your mechanics for the game. This isn't a picture of putting the cart before the horse, like trying to do level design before you know how exactly you move through the level. That to me doesn't make a lot of sense. So you don't want to do this. If you do that, and a lot of times there's some eagerness and excitement, people are like, oh, I have an idea for a game, I want to make a game. And then they try to sketch up some ideas for levels and whatever. And I think that's really valuable and helpful as a starting point to get you excited, to get you inspired. But ultimately, if you use that as the kind of the vehicle to drive the rest of the game, you're going to have a hard time, because the level has there's no foundation. So you need the mechanics first. So anyway, the first step is develop your mechanics. The second step that I find helps a lot is just explore them. it's one thing to have this kit of parts, to have all of these things that can do a bunch of stuff. It's another thing to actually play with them. If you can't play with the mechanics that you have, you're going to have a hard time designing the level. Ideally, when you look at this kit of parts, you get excited, inspired. You can say, oh, maybe what if I do this? What if I do that? Because ideas are cheap, and ultimately it's the execution that matters. You'll find that some implementations work better than other implementations. But if your possibility space is so limited because either your mechanics are uninspiring or you haven't been able to implement them in a nice way, you're not going to get very far. I used an example earlier about, humans having our own embedded set of mechanics. An example of this are stairs. We use stairs in the built environment, and this is my architecture coming up, but we use stairs in the built environment because this is just how we are. That's how we are as humans are built. If I was making a game, I wouldn't necessarily need to use stairs like this. These are the steps at the Met in New York City. The reason there's steps and not just a wall is because we have, 2 feet. We got to go one after the other. But if we were geckos, like my gecko pickle, a sheer wall would be totally fine. So don't take for granted things like even having a floor or having gravity or whatever. Define your mechanics first, and then you can start creating the space. Ideally, once you're done with this exploration process, you should look like this kid here. This is some random kid I found online, but I love the craziness of the contraption that they have created and the maniacal look in their eyes. If you can be at that point when you're working on your levels, you're gonna have an amazing time and an exciting and fun time creating all this fun stuff. If you look at every little piece and how it connects to every other piece here, there are so many moments. Some of them work better than others, but at no point is this kid trying to pull out ideas from something that isn't there. It's always easier to edit and cut away extra ideas than it is to try to, synthesize new concepts out of nothing. That's a really, really difficult thing to do. So try to set yourself up so your possibility space is really big and you've explored all the different ways, these things can intersect with each other. Once you've done that, which I feel often happens by the time people are talking about level design, the core thing that I always think about is, what is my value system? Do I value cost? Oh, let's not go ahead. Whoa. All right. Do I value cost, convenience, repeatability, predictability? Do I value quality, prestige, appearances? There are infinite permutations for value systems that you can have for your game. But in order for your level design and for the design in general to be coherent, the value system needs to be very clear. It wouldn't make sense for a donut shop that is making kind of like luxury donuts to suddenly crank out a bunch of glazed donuts that look like this. Even if they're affordable, even if they're easier to make and they're convenient and people will purchase them, it's not going to work for that business's business model, because that's not what they're trying to do. And having these two donuts together in the same space kind of dilutes both of them. I want to make sure this point is really clear, because at That Game Company, this is something that we're always trying to go back and ask ourselves, do I actually care about this? Is this actually what I'm trying to do? And a lot of the times it isn't. Once you have your value system, say, okay, I care about, making something that is going to be emotionally resonant, and I really care about the way that the music responds to the level, whatever that is, then you need to make a goal. It can be any goal, but ideally, a really good goal somehow encapsulates a mechanical, a visual, a emotional feeling. At That Game Company, and just personally myself, I think emotion is really the reason that people play games. And I think that if you can create a goal that can do all of those things, then I think you'll be golden. But in the event that you can't, that's totally fine. The goal can be as simple as, I want to teach the player how to, learn how to jump. But you need to have a goal. You can't just like make a level and say, oh, I need 10 levels, so I'm just gonna like create something random. There needs to be a purpose and intention. Once you have that goal, you make a plan on how to achieve it. Don't just jump in and start trying to create something in your editor, whatever it might be. I will hand draw a lot of this stuff. This isn't my hand drawing. This is some random, architectural diagram that I got online. This is one of my hand drawings. But what I try to do is, once I have that goal, like, oh, I want to create a feeling of sadness, and I want to teach the player how to use this new mechanic in a environment that, I don't know, feels like a mountain for whatever reason. Then what I try to do is I just try to quickly sketch the moment-to-moment experiences of what are happening here. And importantly, I try to think about it like postcards. A good game, if you think about all the games that have like impacted you personally, there will often be specific moments. Let me get a second. There will often be moments in those games that resonate with you, that you remember. So when I'm designing a level, I try to close my eyes and say, a year from now, and I had to include this image because I thought it was so funny with the, watermark and all. A year from now, when I'm sitting in my couch next to my fireplace, closing my eyes, I'm recollecting on this experience that I had. What am I going to remember? Most of the time, I find when I do this exercise that the level that I have created may not have even a single moment that meets this criteria. And it's my job as a level designer, and your job as designers, to create as much of these postcard moments as you possibly can. And they can be, mechanical, emotional, visual, like I said. But they should be crisp, clear, and strong. So you can say in one line, oh, it's this, it's that. Here's an example from Sky. So I worked on Season of Dreams, which is about like a skater who learns how to overcome her, setbacks and achieve her ambitions of becoming a skater. This is the level that it takes place in. You can see the values that are embedded in this already. There's a sense of verticality. It's in the mountains, like I talked about. There's like a sense of coziness. Everything is close together. And the pink snow is like very iconic. So when we're working on a level like this, oftentimes we're thinking, okay, I'm gonna close my eyes, an hour from now, 2 hours from now, a day, a week, what will I remember? Ideally, the visual that is created and the way that the level is laid out, the moment-to-moment experiences should lend themselves to mental snapshots like that. So once I have my value system, I have made a plan, and I've thought about all these like postcard images, the next thing that you do is now you step into the editor. The reason that you don't want to step into the editor first, at least I find for myself, is when I step into the editor immediately, I can kind of get sidetracked by what the editor allows me to do and not allows me to do. And I lose, to an extent, my sense of focus. And this isn't unique to game design. A film director doesn't just say, hey, we're going to go make a movie, and without having a script, they just say, all right, we're going to set up a shot. We're going to make a shot where, character A is going to walk up to character B. I know exactly what it needs to be. Even if the director knows exactly what is supposed to happen, there has to be a script prior to that. Otherwise, by the time they get everybody else involved, it's going to be expensive. It's going to get diluted. You're going to have a hard time. That said, I think it's important that everybody thinks about the act of transitioning to the editor as an important part of the level design process in and of itself. there's this concept that when the sculptor is sculpting the stone, the hammer is asserting its influence onto the object, right? And the object is being shaped and carved and that sort of thing. In addition to the hammer asserting its influence onto the work is also asserting its influence back onto the hammer. The object, you know, it might crumble in an area that it wasn't supposed to crumble. The object might have, you know, greater density in one area or another, or perhaps in the lighting, the sculptor might see that the way it's emerging looks different than what they first anticipated. So it isn't a kind of waterfall process where you say, okay, you know, I have my plan, I have my postcard moments, I'm going to execute it in the editor, and it's just going to be perfect. The act of creating it should also feel reciprocal. So you are asserting influence, and then you're also being receptive to what the game is telling you in return. At this point in the level design process is often where the levels tend to look like this. And this isn't just for me, although I think I'm personally predisposed to this, where you think, okay, cool, I have this cool moment. Oh, there's this other interesting thing that is happening here. I have an idea that I want to execute there. We have a narrative goal that we're trying to achieve. There's an emotional beat that we want to make sure to hit. There's all of these different things that are vying to be included in your level. And oftentimes it will result in something that is a bit convoluted, that's hard to parse through. You don't know what is the most important thing here. If you were to close your eyes and walk away, what you'll walk away with is just the sense of, wow, there was a lot of stuff, but you won't have a clear clear memory of something like this. Maybe ultimately, after editing all of this stuff, I find that what really only thing I needed was the bottle opener. And the bottle opener, I value it for its elegance, I value it for its utility, whatever values that I had established earlier. So this part of the process, this editing, I think is one of the most important steps. Oftentimes, particularly with newer designers, we will create a level and kind of feel really awesome when we finish. But look at all the things this level is doing. You know, it's these mechanics are here. I've got this and this and that and whatever. It looks awesome. It looks amazing. But you know the game better than anybody else. When you show this to other people, it's going to feel undisciplined. They're going to describe it as undisciplined, but it's going to manifest that way in the player experience. And that brings us to the next step, which is to playtest. This is a still from the movie Airplane. I don't know if people have seen this classic. If you haven't, I think it's totally worth a watch. In the movie Airplane, this pilot, this guy who's not supposed to be the pilot on this plane, needs to fly this plane and has to kind of be guided through it. It's like a whole ordeal. Your player is like a novice pilot needing to fly a Boeing 747. They don't know the rules of your universe, of your game, like you do. They don't know what story you're trying to tell, like you do. They have no obligation to play it. Creating games is one of the hardest things because you are asking the player to do work. Watching a movie doesn't require me to do work. Listening to music doesn't require me to do work. Nobody is obligated to like try hard at your game. And because of that, playtesting is often one of the most humbling experiences. So you want to playtest with people as often as you can, and people will say this over and over again, but you want to playtest with the intention of finding, with the intention of making progress. You don't just want to playtest for the sake of, oh, haha, we collected a bunch of feedback. We kind of get a feeling for what's going to be here. You want to make sure your playtest is actionable. And the way I think about this is, if I were walking in a gallery and I saw somebody playing this game, the one that I have created, experiencing the level that I have created, and this person is having that experience, If I could put that experience onto a canvas and frame it in a gallery, would it be something that I'm proud of? 99.99999% of the time, the answer is no. Playtests will always leave you feeling like, wow, I suck. I need to work way harder to make this better. But that's precisely what they're for. You want to have that high standard of, this experience that the player has gone through could fit in a gallery alongside other works of art that I personally value. Otherwise, you're not going to get there. And lastly, this is the last slide I have. Your job as the designer, particularly when you're working with level design, is to communicate. As a level designer, you are responsible for a lot. And it isn't just your discipline that's going in. You have other artists who are going in. There might be animators that are making animations that are relevant to your level. You might have audio designers who are making, audio design specific to your level. Narratively, you want to make sure that the story that the level is trying to communicate resonates with the story of the entire game. Just all of these other parties need to be aware what the intentions are and what the process is, especially QA. So, especially during development, if you have people who are playtesting your game that are QA testers, not play testers, it's QA's job to know what the bugs are and what the bugs aren't. And often I think and the reason I'm talking about this is I think that QA gets overlooked oftentimes in game development pipelines, but QA's job is incredibly important. So as the level designer, it's your obligation to also communicate to them what you want and what you don't want, and they can help you for sure. Oh, it's lagging. Okay, well, luckily for you guys, that was the last slide that I have, and I'm hoping that it was helpful. But as I said in the beginning, I did want this to be more of a conversation than just me like talking the whole time. So I think at this point, we'll just open it up for questions. I know there was a bunch posted in the chat. I just didn't get back to them. So yeah, that's all I got. This is like a quick little summary here. Click to add title. Level design. Whee! There you go.
Everybody raise your hands if you want to ask a question or send it in the chat as usual.
What do you consider to be the most important aspect of a well-designed game level? I think it's this postcard thing I was talking about. And I say that because it can mean anything. A well-designed level can just be a beautiful level. A well-designed level can just be a level that felt great. There was like a jump and I didn't know I could make the jump, and then I made it. And then I learned something and that made me feel amazing. I think this is, for me, the metric that I kind of establish. Okay, question number 1, where's Leo? Leo's, he just got into the other room. The bedroom, probably hiding under the bed. And you can also ask me questions about that game company, about game whatever. I try to be as transparent as possible wherever I can. What is the distribution of labor between an environment artist and level designer? Does the level designer control the landscape or the environment artist? That's actually a great question. I do. Let's see if the article is still there. There we go. Okay, so here's this. There's this article on that on Nintendo.com from Season of Prophecy, where they asked me a bunch of stuff. Let's see here. Oh, they didn't include it. They used to have images on this article that included what the level looked like prior to the artist coming in and what the level looked like after. Every studio does it a little differently, but the way I see it is the level designer is responsible for saying, okay, we're going to have a castle. The castle needs to be this tall. Yeah, 50 tabs. I cry. This is this is my life. The level designer says we're going to have a castle. It's going to be this tall. We're going to have a moat, and I'm going to block it out like out of clay. This is where it's going to be. The environment artist role is to say, okay, we have a castle that exists. It needs to go here. It needs to be this tall. How am I going to work with the designer to make this castle feel the way it's supposed to feel, to make it look the way it's supposed to look? And this is often, in a healthy relationship, a reciprocal thing, where I, as a designer, will say, oh, I'm going to have like a big mountain here, and there's going to be a lake with a boat in the front. And the environment artist might say, you know what? Our game engine doesn't render water very well. This is going to look like crap. Would you be okay if it's, instead of like a liquid lake, if it's a frozen lake? You still get everything you want, but that way we still make it look good. And we kind of go back and forth. I hope that answers the question, but that's often where I see the distinction. Okay, let me see what else. What was your starting position at that game company? I was a game designer. I just came in as a game designer, and it was the best. Can you send a game, Kareem, I made to get level design feedback? People are I'm more than happy to like look at stuff that you send me. If I don't get back to you, that's not personal. I'm just really bad with this stuff in general. You can even ask Ashraf and everybody. I took forever to get back to them. Not because I didn't like it. How to know when you can play normal mechanics that is available in any games and make it different, but feel familiar to it? I think this question is about creating like jumping, which you do over and over and over again, and somehow make the jump new. That is the level, in my experience, it's the level designer's job to do this slide here. Dun, dun, dun. Find ways for pieces to fit together where they're not supposed to fit together. And an example of that is like, you might have seen online people playing Counter-Strike and they're on those surf maps, like they're like abusing the physics of the system to create this like new parkour type gameplay. As the level designer, you have to develop your mechanics, but you also have to be comfortable breaking them. And I think if you can't break them and turn them into new things, it's going to be hard to kind of breathe new life. And it's like a puzzle game design philosophy, actually. All right, let's see here. Is it required to level designer to be able to create 3D models, or is it fine using assets and making 3D artists create models? Okay, this is a good point. It depends on your studio and depends on your own capabilities. For me personally, when I worked on, like this is a game that I worked on, I made all of the assets myself, and I also laid them out myself. But that is not a requirement of a level designer, because ultimately, making this look cool, making this an iconic shape, or, adding the depth of field and the kind of color and everything else, that's the role of the artist to execute. The level designer needs to have a vision. But to answer your question, you can be a good level designer with a bunch of cubes, which is why I included this slide here. So long as you can communicate what your goal is. If you can't arrange cubes or communicate in diagrams what your intention is for the space, then no, you're not gonna do well in this. What was the software you used for landscaping the level? I always like to use the editor that the game is going to ship with. So for Sky has a proprietary engine and editor that we use for everything. This is probably Unreal Engine here. For this game, I used Unreal. For this game, I used Unity. I really don't think it matters. There is no right tool or wrong tool. It's whatever tool works for you. But if you're blocking it out in some other software that isn't your editor, that isn't your engine, you're just going to make more work for yourself when you need to translate it over. Where do I contact you though? LinkedIn, Discord, Twitter, where do you prefer? You can email me. LinkedIn is totally fine. My contact information is available. I have a website too. If I wanted to model real world buildings or places, do I need to worry about architectural copyrights or something like that? As far as I'm aware, no, but I'm not a lawyer. So don't take my word for it. Where can I find the GDC talk that you mentioned earlier? You can just do my name and then GDC, or you can just do cognitive map GDC, and there it is. I'll post this link in the chat right now while we're at it. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What else? From one architect to the other, does it help with level design, or is it completely different expertise and experience? Yes, it 100% helps. Being an architect or architectural designer, having, practiced or studied architecture, I really think makes you an invaluable level designer. And studios are aware of this. I largely believe one of the reasons that I was able to get into that game company was because of my background as an architectural designer and my comfortability leveraging that in level design practice. As an architectural designer yourself, you're used to thinking in plan, to thinking in section, to thinking about circulation, all of those sorts of things. And that's basically what level design is, but just in games. Okay. Okay. Are there any specific challenges you face when designing levels for multiplayer game versus single player games? Yes. 5 million times, yes. Multiplayer is exponentially more difficult than single player. Most of the bugs and problems that we encounter in Sky actually have to do with resolving level states across different clients. With Sky, you can play with up to 8 people at a time. And now we've actually added it so that you can play in specific instances with up to 8,000 people at a time. Somehow making sure that everybody's intention is communicated clearly and with latency, it all makes sense, is very, very, very difficult to do from a technical standpoint. And from a design standpoint, you have to think about like an intersection. If it's a single player game, it's just like a one-way road and the road just turns left. If it's a multiplayer game, it's like an intersection and there's 10 lanes going in either direction. There's people that want to go left, straight, right, U-turn, everything. It gets way more complicated. So I wouldn't recommend trying to do a multiplayer game first. You can help it. As someone who has no prior experience working in gaming studios, do you have any tips on how I can apply or get noticed by recruiters? Yeah, so I experienced this a lot. I had a hard time finding a job in a game studio. That game company was actually the last studio that I applied to. I had spent about 1.5 years looking for work, and nobody worked looking for work in games, and no one was getting back to me. That's actually, fun fact, the reason I was so depressed when I made this game, because I was looking for work and I just couldn't do it. That said, my learnings were make a game first. You have to develop your portfolio. Nobody is going to, and I say this because I review applications for our designer roles at the studio as my responsibility. I might love your personality. I might believe in your resume. But if I can't understand what your design sensibilities are, it's gonna, I can't be confidently take you and have you join the team. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for work, try to create a portfolio. It doesn't have to be games necessarily. Ideally, there's at least one game in there so I can be confident that like this person has made a game before. But just like graphic design, visual design, whatever it might be, that helps the most. I care about resumes and stuff, but for me personally, when I review applications, and I know my peers as well, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So I would emphasize the portfolio. Okay, dun, dun, dun. Okay, yes, person with the raised hand. Sorry, I think I got through most of the chat questions. Sorry about that.
Hello.
Yes, hi.
Hi, how are you? And first of all, I want to say thank you a lot for being here and aiding all of us.
I'm happy to be here.
Okay. And I have actually 2 questions.
Yeah.
So my first question is, as someone that I am still trying in the process of like, okay, yeah, I'm building the portfolio. I have some other experiences in other fields like graphic design, video editing, and stuff like that. But I am transitioning into the game industry, and I am obviously gonna start the ladder from game designer. But my goal is to also reach a level design position. Like I want to do level design. It's the thing that I find most entertaining to me, at least right now. So what would you advise, give me advice for me to reach that, as someone that actually does not have access to education, higher education in that realm? Because multiple times I would look into something or ask people and they would say, oh, like get a master's in level design, which is not accessible for me in my country.
Right. So
So what would you say?
yeah, let me answer that part. I don't think you need a degree. I personally don't care if an applicant applies and they're like, oh, I went to this like crazy awesome school and I spent all this money. Like, it doesn't matter for me if your portfolio doesn't resonate with me. You know, one of our designers at the studio was a biology student, and then they stopped studying biology, and then they did Age of Empires campaigns, and like now they're a game designer and they're awesome. There's another designer who worked at Sanrio doing, interior like displays and that sort of thing. And now they're here because they developed a portfolio that was convincing and compelling. Design, if like you can learn how to use the tools. Like somebody asked about like what tools you use for this. Like if you don't know how to use Unreal, it's not a big deal. I'll teach you how to use Unreal. You will learn how to use it. If you don't know how to use whatever, that's fine. But what I can't teach you is the sensitivity to design and how to work in a team and how to be collaborative and how to know when you found something good, how to think through the process like I've outlined here. I think that's harder. So what I would recommend for you is try to work on a game. Try to get that in a portfolio. And if you're feeling like you're lacking resources, go online and find tutorials on YouTube. That's honestly the best thing. The editors are free. 1.5 million people making tutorials on YouTube to help you execute your idea. And the ultimate reality is it's gonna suck for a while. It's not gonna be good. And you're going to feel bad and you're going to be like, I want to be good, but I'm not very good. But that's just, you have to like work through that just with anything else. You know, if somebody learns how to skateboard, they look at Tony Hawk and they're like, man, I want to be Tony Hawk, but I can't even stay on the board. It takes time. And the last thing I will say to that is you need to lean on your strengths. The reason that I mentioned like, oh, my background was in architecture was because this influences my personal strengths. I have weaknesses as well, but I'm not going to pitch myself as a narrative designer, for example. If I don't have experience doing narrative stuff, or if I'm not personally good at telling stories, or I hadn't told enough stories in a portfolio, like it's easier for me to convince somebody, hey, you should give me money because I am good at this thing. And because I'm good at this thing, I can also do these other things for you. You know, it's like I'm not going to hire a sushi chef to go like work on my car, but I may hire a sushi chef to make pasta because the skills are they cross a little bit more. So I would take that into mind too.
Okay, and my second question is actually like how do you go on like targeting your how do I say it? It's technically two parts. Like how do you develop a portfolio more specifically towards something, and how do you exactly pursue looking for quote unquote jobs?
Yeah, good question. So I have a lot of experience with this because it took me forever to find work, and because now my role is to interview candidates. Part of my role. What I will say is, firstly, and a friend told me this when I was having a hard time. Unfortunately, life is not a meritocracy. So I could be really awesome. I could be really good, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to get a job. And that sucks. Ideal in a perfect world, I think the good people get the jobs and the people who suck don't get the jobs, and it just works that way, but it doesn't. So first thing I would recommend is all of your peers, your friends here in this group, like create relationships with them, try to create relationships with, you know, the instructors, people lecturing like myself, try to follow up with them. You're going to get ghosted most of the time, but that's okay. What you're trying to do is create personal connections and make it so that you're not just a random person applying to the job, but there is some shared commonality. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is you need to put yourself in the positions of somebody who is hiring. A person who is hiring is saying, they're not saying, oh, I can't wait to give money to somebody. What they're saying is, I need a job done. And I need it done so badly, I'm willing to give my money to somebody to do this job. If you think about it that way, then you go, okay, well, I'm like a problem solver for people. What I'm meeting the needs of a studio. How can I best market myself that way? If EA is working on FIFA 2070 million, whatever, and my portfolio consists of a bunch of 2D side-scrolling platformer games, that isn't going to resonate with them as much, because in their heads they're like, what the hell, like we need somebody to figure out how to do, you know, economy design for in-app purchases, but this person does level design for 2D side-scrolling games. I said earlier that you don't need to create one-to-one, you know, like I don't need to have a portfolio full of soccer games in order to help out EA work on FIFA, but it won't make sense for EA to hire somebody who doesn't have at least some amount of shared background. So when you are applying to studios, you need to keep that in mind. Like if you're applying to a AAA studio that's working on big first-person shooter games, and like you don't have a first-person shooter game that is either at a AAA studio, which is not going to be the case, or innovative in some way, or graphically resonant with what they make, like there needs to be enough overlap for that person who needs the solution so bad they're willing to pay somebody to go, oh, you know what? This person might be somebody that can get the job done. I'm willing to give them a chance, if that makes sense. Those are the two advice I have.
Okay. So like it's I kind of targeted my question as in like, okay, should I make my games more diverse into like, okay, yeah, people say start 2D, so I start making couple of 2D games, like just to understand the logic of
you
coding
make your
and
game,
stuff.
Make your game the best game it can be. Don't like try to make it this way or that way to get a job. Make it the best game that it is. Make it your game, and then that will get you, that will be better off for you. Nobody cares about, you know, another like roguelike game if it's not innovative in some way. If you're just making it to like make it because it's a roguelike and you're like, oh well, I should make it to add to my portfolio, that's not gonna like mean much, if that makes sense.
Okay, but if my games are also closed in a space, like all my games are shooters, for example, that's not necessarily a big negative if I'm not applying for a studio that makes only shooters.
No, that's not a negative, but you should just be aware, just like with anything, you know, it's like, oh, I've spent the last 30 years working in Italian restaurants and now I'm applying for a job at a barbecue place. Like, it's not bad. It's just, you have to be aware of that.
Okay. Thank you a lot.
Okay, let me try to answer some of these in the thing. Okay. Do gaming companies provide work visa sponsorships abroad for selected candidates who have the required experiences? Yes, it is hard though, because at least as far as the US is concerned, depending on the size of your studio, you get a certain number of them. So you're essentially competing with others. in similar positions for those sponsorships. So it can be a little hard, but with work remote stuff, I don't know exactly how that works. So something to consider. I've been talking a lot. Does anybody else have any other questions? I do want to be a resource for you as much as I can.
Actually, I have a question about Sky, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So generally, whenever you're trying to think of a new campaign to start out with, what are some things that you take as inspiration? What are some things that you look at in order to kind of create the new level that you want to make? Because you know, there's a lot of uniqueness between one another, basically. So it's just, you know, how do you keep it fresh while at the same time making sure to keep the essence of Sky, you know, in each area that you create and stuff? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, it does. So remember in this whoops, let's get out of here. How did I even get to this? What? Okay, oh, it's like a weird presentation mode. Here we go. In this presentation, there's this slide here, which is, okay, I have my values, I have my mechanics. The next step is like, I need to make a goal. If you do have your values and you know what the game is supposed to be and what the game isn't supposed to be, how you want it to evolve, how you don't want it to evolve, when you make a goal, what you're doing is you're not infilling, you're not saying like, oh, I need new content. How do I make new content? What you're saying is, I have an ambition to make a better version of this donut. I have an ambition to make a better version of this donut. What it's lacking is this. What it's lacking is that. And my goal is an attempt to get closer to my values. So with Sky, we're always trying to create empathy between people, human emotion, social interaction, visual beauty. Like those are the we try to emphasize those over and over again to refine those. So when we're making a new season or making new content, we have to ask, does it fit our core values here? Do we have this mechanic, or do we need to make a new mechanic in order to like have this happen? And what are going to be the postcard moments for this this new level we're making? That's how we kind of approach this process. And a lot of the time, if any one of those things doesn't meet our standards, we just cut it, or we continue to develop it until it gets better. For Season of Performance, it started with the idea for Season of Performance. For those who are not aware, they don't know anything about Sky. Sky is, where is Sky in my presentation? Sky basically looks like this slide that I've shown over and over again, but there's so many different like storylines in the world, whatever. Season of Performance was about a bunch of young characters learning how to participate in community theater. The reason we wanted to do that was multiple. Remember, I kept saying you want like a visual goal, an emotional goal, a mechanical goal. Visually, we wanted to make players feel like they are connected with others and in this like cozy community theater. Emotionally, we wanted to make players feel inspired to create work. Like they can sit down and watch others perform, and they can perform too, kind of to feel like they belong to something. And mechanically, we wanted an excuse to expand our tech so that we could create better networked level events. So we created this theater that like had all these switches that you could pull. Because our goal encapsulated the visual, the emotional, and mechanical, and we had the values that we already identified, we were able to kind of like hike this journey, knowing with confidence that we're going someplace we care about because our values are there. So whatever it winds up being, we'll be okay with. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
We have a question by Omar, so I'll just let him unmute. That's okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. I have two questions, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
The first one is I wanted to ask your opinion on how to keep like level design integrity while working on a procedural game, like something that is procedurally generated, or you're trying to basically generate through a set of levels or something.
Mhm.
How would you keep like the level design still
Yeah.
looking good for players or still have intention in any way, shape, or form?
So the closest thing to procedural generation I have personally worked on, well, no, actually I did two procedural. I actually worked on an experimental project where we were trying to procedurally generate environments to help players memorize stuff. It like wasn't a game as much as it was like a tool. And then I also did procedural generation when it came to like these enemies and that sort of thing. I will say with you know, procedurally generated stuff, it's always going to be a challenge to balance the longevity of your game with the, you know, RNG toolkit that you've created, and frame your expectations properly. If you're trying to create a game that is going to be infinitely replayable, that's going to be hard. Just because it's procedurally generated doesn't mean it's going to feel good forever. So instead, I think it's important to like frame expectations and your goals for like, okay, let's say I'm making a 2D platformer game that's procedurally generated, and you know, I have some, I don't know, biomes or something I'm working on. For me to expect, oh, you know, I expect a player is probably going to play this for about 2 to 3 hours, or I expect a player is going to play this for about 6 hours, or whatever, helps me focus on what is actually important and what actually matters. It can be tricky with procedural generation in particular to get lost in the weeds, to get lost in like the tech and how do I get this edge case to like work, you know, when this meets this, and how do I make more of these cases and more of those cases or whatever. You can play that game forever. Like you will never finish solving that problem. And we've seen that with games that have shipped, like, you know, everybody's going to talk about No Man's Sky with procedural generation, but it's exceptionally difficult. So instead, what I would say is procedural generation is good. You should do it. Know what your values are, what you care about, and don't spend time trying to refine parts of your levels that don't align with what your values are. And if your value truly is about creating, you know, a level that is genuinely, you know, replayable over and over again, has great integrity, then totally fine. Don't spend your time working on the other parts of your game until you get this one sorted out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I see what you mean. Is it definitely just don't get lost in like the sauce basically, and like keep working on the little small things basically when it comes to the like the tool itself, the toolkit.
Especially when you're working on your own project, your deadline is just whatever you want your deadline to be. So you could just do it forever, which is bad.
Okay, when it comes to my second question, sorry if I'm taking too much of your time. Basically I wanted to ask, when you're working on a game that the game loop basically keeps repeating within the same level or within the same sort of scenery, like basically maybe a bakery where the game loop is shifts, or a house where the game loop is like finding ghosts, or these kinds of games, how do you keep the level from being like boring basically, or still have it be fresh? Or make a level that's basically, you know, easy on the eyes when you see it like for the 20th or 30th time.
Yeah. So I think you gotta, this is what I was talking about when I said what you're making is a field of play. If this, the reason this images works well is because none of these things are restrictive in what they allow the kids to do. It's not like there's a man sitting here that says you can only sit down at this bench and you can only talk to other people at this bench. You know, that's the only thing it's good for. No, instead it's open-ended. You know, there's a tunnel, you can talk in the tunnel, you can run through the tunnel, you can do a bunch of stuff. So to make a space, because a level is ultimately a space, to make a space something that you don't mind and actually you look forward to going back to over and over and over again, is you want to have like an analog approach to it as opposed to like a digital approach. And this is used in puzzle game like theory a lot. So with a digital paradigm, something is either on or off. There's only like two options, you know, it's either bright or it's dark. But when something is analog, it can be anything in between. It can be dark, it can be a little lighter, a little lighter, a little lighter. Like there's an infinite scale in between there. So I would say for your level, and this is tied back with your mechanics, if you can make it as open-ended as possible so that the player can make use of this canvas instead of having this canvas be, and we're going to do some, you guys are going to get to see how awesome my, oh, I can't annotate. Weird. Anyway, if this was not a blank canvas and this was just like a fill in the lines thing, and I only gave you 2 colors of paint, like you're going to run out of options very quickly thereafter.
I see. So basically give them like for the rooms that they go in, basically give them multiple things to do in it, or basically every time they enter this space, they can sort of see it from a different light, or find a different position to be in or look from, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, an example is like so let's say you play a game, and in order to climb up a wall, that tells you press the button X to climb up the wall, and you press X and they do this canned animation, they climb up to the wall and they've done it. Hooray. That's fine. But there's only so many times I'm going to be able to press X before I go, okay, this is boring. But if climbing up the wall is a way for me to express myself as a player, you know, I can run up the wall and decide I'm going to go straight up. You know, I can go up the wall, there's an obstacle, I can go around it, or just the act of climbing allows me to do what the game is best at. Then suddenly I will do it over and over again, because that's the fun part of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Let me quickly go over these other questions in the chat, unless there's somebody else that had their hand raised. What factors contribute to the addictive nature of games like Fortnite, Clash of Clans, where other games often fail to capture and maintain players' interest, leaving them feeling bored? Okay, I'll try to do this quickly. We do live in an attention economy. People's attention spans are short. Frankly, we see this with Sky even. With Sky, we're trying to create spaces that are contemplative, and you know, people can absorb them and take a break in their day. But it is a mobile game ultimately, and people sometimes stop playing because there isn't a lot of like big flashy stuff to do. I think personally, you need to do something that resonates with your values, like your personal values. Otherwise, you're going to feel like a grimy, dirty person. In that way, for games like Fortnite or Clash of Clans or whatever, doesn't say that those games are bad. Like, I like Sky, yeah, but I also like playing Doom. Like, is Doom worse than Sky because of all the gore and all of the like glowy power-ups? No, it's just a different experience. So again, it goes back to like knowing what your values are. And I personally don't think one is necessarily better than the other, as long as the game is transparent in what it's trying to tell you. How many games produced do you consider as a good amount before applying to jobs? Even if you only have one. Even if you have half a finished game, if it's just a trailer, because here's the thing, when I go on your website, I'm not going to play your game. I'm just going to look at a trailer. I'm going to be like, oh, okay, cool. I get what the idea is. So that helps a lot. Do you have books you recommend? What about series of points and non-game inspiration to strengthen level creation? Do you believe we can teach players to level design instead of tutorials? Yeah, definitely the hardest thing you can do is to try to teach players how to do something without a tutorial. But a lot of good games do that. Like classic is Super Mario Bros. Level 1-1 is a great example of teaching players how to do stuff and getting them ready for the rest of the game. Books that you recommend, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is my favorite book of all time, but that's not a game design book. It's just fun. Do you have any advice for games that have the same level? Oh, this one we already talked about. Doom X Animal Crossing best values, yeah. Okay. Any final questions or things that I didn't talk about? How are you so cool? It's an illusion. It's all an illusion. Awesome. Okay, well, in that case, if you want to contact me, so my name is Nicolas Oueijan. So you can look up, my website is nicoueijan.com. You can also just find me on LinkedIn, whatever. Send me a message. Again, don't take it personal if I don't get back to you. That's just because I suck at it. I would say go online, look at all the tutorials you can, but don't worry about getting lost in the weeds. Do something that you care about and that you like. If you don't like it, nobody else is going to like it. And you will find your own process. The reason that people care about, you know, Picasso is like such a recognizable figure, and you know, you have oh my god, I can't think of the name, the guy that does the splatter paint, the postmodernist guy. Anyway, every artist has their own way. Pollock, there we go, thank you. Every artist has their own process, and the work reflects that process. If your goal is to create work that is identical to somebody else's work, you're going to fail because you're not that person. So just try to find your own voice, believe in yourself, and even when it sucks, don't think that you suck, because you don't suck. That's all I got. Thank you, everyone. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Can you do the closing? Awesome. I'm going to hop off. I've got to get back to my job. And by the way, for the record, it is a great job. I love my job. It's amazing. So if you can endure, you know, game design is great. All right, thank you so much, everyone, and really appreciate just even having this.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nick. All right, take care.
Bye.
See ya. I hope everyone had fun. And yeah, if you all have any questions, you can send them to Nick directly. You can find him on his website. And I'll send him an invite to the Discord server. So by the time this is up, he should be in. Unless he doesn't see the email, then it's going to be a bit later. Take care, everyone. See you.